Well, good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm Neil Chase. I'm the CEO at CalMatters. We have a great turnout today in the room and online, and very happy to have everybody with us. For those of you who don't know CalMatters, we're a nonprofit news organization. We cover policy and politics up and down California, and we have been doing a lot of work on electric vehicles, electric vehicle coverage, because it is such a big, not only issue in the state, but a policy in the state, right? A declared intention to do more of it. And kind of a fascinating conversation today. We really believe in this kind of live journalism, bringing people together for a conversation, letting the people who are involved in this talk and share their thoughts, getting questions from the folks online, from the folks in the room. And for us, a live event is a story. When you do a story, you go out and decide who you want to talk to, how do you get all the right perspectives for your story, take it in, distill it, figure it out, get it written. I know I make it sound a lot easier than it is. And this is the same way. We hope that this conversation leads you to some conclusions, some learnings, some thoughts, and the next steps. We are, I will mention, because it's my job, a nonprofit organization. We're grateful to those of you who support us. If you don't get our newsletter, and if you're not a member, we'd encourage you to consider doing both. There's some sign-ups at the front door for folks who are in the room here. We're going to do this for about an hour. We'll talk for a bit and take questions toward the end. And I want to especially thank our sponsors, Lucas Public Affairs. They have been good friends of ours from day one, 8 years ago when we got started. And they are making this event and our event series this year possible. So we're tremendously grateful to Lucas and Donna and her team. And with that, we're going to dive into this rather deep question, not only of what's up with electric cars, but can we actually do it, and how do we do it in a thoughtful and just way? With that, I'll introduce Alejandro Lazo, who is one of our lead reporters on climate issues, and let him take it from here.
Thank you very much, Neil, and thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for this wonderful panel. I'm really excited to just get into this really important, really fascinating subject. And I'd first like to just introduce everybody. So we've got Lisa, Steve, Orville, and Ted. I'm going to do a little bit more formal introduction right now, so you know exactly a little bit about their background and what we'll be discussing today. So Lisa here is the chief of the Equitable Mobility Incentives branch within the Mobile Source Control Division at the California Air Resources Board. She'll be here to help us, learn what California is doing to help everybody in this zero-emission transition. Steve, and it just turns out you all sat exactly as in order, so this is great. So Steve is the Vice President of Energy and Environment for the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. Steve can help us understand environmental regulations and the transition from the automaker's point of view. Thanks very much for joining us, Steve. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Orville Thomas. Orville Thomas is CalSTART's State Policy Director, and he oversees budget and legislative advocacy in California. You have some fans in the room.
I bought them for
Obviously, Orville is an advocate for zero-emission vehicles here in California, and so we'll be getting his perspective on what the state is doing from an advocacy point of view. And then Ted Lamm. Ted Lamm is the Senior Research Fellow in the Climate Program at the Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment at Berkeley Law. Ted's work focuses on the development of state and local climate policies, transportation, and building electrification and climate-related risks. So please give a big hand to our wonderful panel. I'm obviously extremely grateful for your time and your expertise, so thank you very much. And Lisa, I would love to just kick things off with you. Just big picture, why are we here? Why does it matter to California, to the world, that California makes this shift toward no new gasoline car sales in 2035?
All right. Thanks for the great introduction and for kind of kicking us off. Setting the stage is really important. So as you all, I'm sure know, we are facing significant challenges with the climate. Temperatures are rising. We're seeing higher than ever water temperatures along our east coast right now. We're seeing a lot of ice melting in the north. We're seeing a lot of erosion just even throughout the United States. And all of that is because of the increasing temperatures that we're seeing. And we're seeing significant storms that are going to have huge impacts, not just on land, but on the economy. And the best way to tackle some of these things really is to get at moving towards as clean of technology as we possibly can. Not to mention the fact that air quality in the state of California is still a critical goal for us in reducing and making sure that our non-attainment areas, those areas in the state that really struggle with air quality, like Southern California and our San Joaquin Valley, have tools that we can use, like clean technology, electric cars, to make sure that folks in those areas really can access the cleanest air possible, reduce hospitalizations, bring down asthma risk and things like that. So from a global standpoint and a local standpoint, it's really important that we're taking measures to move towards electric vehicles.
Ted, I'd love you to weigh in, sort of come from an expert point of view. As we've seen laid out, we're really responding to the climate crisis here in California with mandates and also incentives, and we're really focusing on transportation, cars and trucks. Are these the important steps? Are these the most important steps a state like California should be taking to combat climate change?
So first, thank you for having all of us.
Absolutely.
This is great. And short answer, yes. Transportation emissions are, I believe, close to or above 50% of statewide GHG emissions here in California, and nationwide it's a little lower, but it's the number one or number two source of emissions in the country and in the world. And it's crucial that we tackle it, and we have technology to do so, and we have policies, and the state and the Air Resources Board have been, for a couple of decades now, leading on that in a way that other states and now the federal government are following, and the automakers are following. So it is doable and it is crucial. The one thing I would add to that is it's also just a monumental piece of policy. And a vehicle is one of the top few most expensive things any of us will ever purchase or lease or own anyway. And we build our lives around them, for better or worse, in many ways for worse. In this state, we build our lives around motor vehicle travel. But that's the way it is, and the state is trying to shift society over the course of a decade plus into a new technology that is going to be a big deal for a lot of people. So a lot of supporting strategies are needed to make sure that that rolls out in a functional way.
Absolutely. And I think, full disclosure, I drive a not fancy car whatsoever. It's a 2000 Toyota Echo. You've maybe never heard of that car before because they stopped making it. It's this sort of like strange spaceship-looking vehicle. I think Toyota probably decided, 10 or 15 years ago, like, what were we doing? But I bought it in 2 decades ago when I started my career as a reporter in the Central Valley of California, and I bought it because it was reliable, it was cheap, I was dead broke, so I needed a really cheap car, and it had good gas mileage, and 2 decades later, here we are talking about a completely new phenomenon, the electric car, but nevertheless, I think some of those principles still remain. I mean, I think everyday Californians think about, we need a sort of inexpensive, reliable, and trusty car. So I'm thinking about this conversation in sort of two parts, and that's how I kind of want to kind of just go down the road with that 2 parts in mind. I'm thinking about, first of all, just the challenges that exist in buying these cars, because we think about electric cars. I know it's sort of changed to some degree in the sense of affordability, but we think of these cars as sort of luxury items to some degree, or at least they began as luxury items, or something for early adopters, I think is maybe best said. I was looking up the price. The average price of a new electric car was $53,469 as of July. I think that's from Blue Book. That's about $5,000 more than the average car. So the price of electric cars are coming down and becoming more accessible. And so I just kind of wanted to start just talking about, the cost of buying a car, the sort of, and then asking this question about sort of just the availability of them. Will increased competition begin to bring down the cost of owning pursuing electric and other zero-emission cars, when will we see electric cars being cheaper, perhaps, than just gasoline-powered cars? Steve, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, given your role with the automakers. What's the future for the cost of electric cars?
Okay, thank you very much. And to start, I sincerely appreciate being on the panel with such a good group of people. This is my second panel with Alejandro, and it's shocking because I get invited a lot. I never get invited back. So, and also, I'm also a fellow Toyota Echo driver.
No kidding. Okay.
That is a great car, and I loved that car. And so. And I bought it for the exact same reasons. It's cheap, it's great mileage, it was a great car. Electric vehicles, and Alejandro's exactly right. Electric vehicles right now, the average price is $53,000, and they've hovered between $60,000 and $70,000 over the last year. And there are affordable vehicles out there, and I think competition will help drive the cost down. However, the most expensive part of an electric vehicle is the battery. And it's not just California where we said, we're not the only place where they said, electric vehicles, that's a great thing, let's do it. It's global. And it's not just light-duty vehicles that we're talking about. It's heavy duty, it's medium duty. The California Air Resources Board, they have a requirement for 100% heavy and medium and light duty by 2036. So I say that we're competing for these lithium-ion batteries and all of the chemistry, the cobalt, the nickel, the lithium. We're competing for those. And right now we have a world that's kind of built around a fairly small demand compared to what we need in the next 5 to 10 years. We'll certainly get there. But these are really long lead times. So one of the concerns that I think we have is that the critical minerals that we need to power these vehicles and the cost of those will go up as the demand for light duty, medium duty, heavy duty, also for energy storage systems, because we have solar, so a lot of energy storage systems use lithium-ion batteries. So there's a concern that the price of those critical minerals and the price of the batteries and the price of the vehicles could go up. We're certainly have lower cost vehicles, but they're probably, I think, on the low end, 26,000. And Alejandro's right; it's the average price is 53,000, which is double the price of a compact car. So I think we have a lot of work to do. I think the federal tax credits, the Inflation Reduction Act, that's very helpful. There's a lot of incentives in there for that. So that will be helpful over the next few years. But of course, that goes away in 2032, and a lot of the vehicles don't qualify today, and probably won't, even less will qualify tomorrow.
Yeah, I was really going to ask about the sort of the demographics of ownership here in California, but since we're kind of kicking things off with incentives, or we're just kind of naturally leading into incentives, Lisa, I'd love to have you talk to us a little bit about your work at the Air Resources Board. What are the main barriers to accessing a new zero emissions vehicle, and what is California working on and doing to make California cars more affordable? We'll all need to buy them new whenever we do buy a new car in a decade plus. But what's happening now to make that more available?
All right. A lot. There's a lot happening. And I probably won't catch all of it, but to give you a good synopsis, the biggest barriers, there's several, but some of the largest ones really are affordability, infrastructure, and being able to charge a vehicle, and education and just knowledge that the vehicles not only exist, but that they are reliable. They're still considered a new technology among several consumers, especially those that aren't typically the new car buyer. Consumers that habitually buy used cars, for example, and kind of stay in that realm, they're just now starting to really see electric cars in the used space. And so for them, that's a brand new technology. And overcoming that, we have a number of projects that we've been working on that really kind of coincide with setting some regulatory boundaries. And so we do have goals to, as we've talked about already, reach 100% electric vehicle sales by 2036. But in order to get there, We know that it's going to take not just asking car makers to make the vehicles, but really helping consumers that buy them buy the right vehicles, as well as help consumers that maybe don't buy an electric vehicle or don't use a vehicle on their own have access to electric vehicle transportation, whether that's by using some type of transportation, some type of transit line, or even using a car share or a bike share type program. So really trying to help consumers understand that they've got very clean options ahead of them. So some of the programs that we have that have evolved over time, we kind of started out with our flagship program back in 2009, known as the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project. Maybe you've seen that. It's been around a long time, and it's varied quite a bit over the years. But that program was really targeted at getting as many zero-emission vehicles on the road as possible. It was entirely for ZEV deployment, zero-emission vehicle deployment, and helping consumers see the cars, making sure that there were cars on the road that when you're driving, you could identify that, hey, that car's a little bit different. It's got an EV logo. And during the time of developing the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, we also did a lot of outreach, and we've worked with other groups like Velos, which is a statewide endeavor to help build education campaigns, to make sure that consumers could access them through ride and drives. You could go to a local event and you can try out an electric car. We've evolved a bit since then and have started to move our incentives a bit more towards consumers that haven't had the opportunity yet to access incentives. So while we focused initially on really trying to get as many cars out there as possible, now that we have reached some major goals, the first being 1.5 million vehicles, we had a target of 2025 to reach that many sales in California, and we're 2 years ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. So we are starting to shift all of our incentive programs really to focus on low-income consumers and consumers that live in disadvantaged communities. And what I mean by that is communities that have been disproportionately impacted by air pollution and the economy and other environmental factors. And we have worked to develop everything from car scrap and repair programs where you can get rid of your old dirty vehicle, get an incentive for scrapping the car, and you can replace it with something newer, or we're going to give you a lot more if you go to EV, electric cars. And that includes plug-in hybrid electric vehicles too, because we want to make sure that consumers have a choice, especially right now, while the resources are limited and the vehicle choices are limited. We want to make sure that consumers can get whether they need a small car or a minivan for their larger family. We also have financing programs available where if you are credit challenged or you typically have a hard time getting a loan or the loan interest rates are too high, we have programs that will work with you to evaluate your income through special underwriting procedures and help you get a loan that's more affordable, as much as only 8% for that electric car. And then when you put all of those things together, currently, today, the incentive that you could get is $19,500 if you are scrapping a car and replacing it with an electric car. That won't last, though. We are shifting things around a little bit as things do begin to transition. And so we expect those amounts to change over the course of the next year, but right now, it's a really great bump. And on the other side, if you aren't a vehicle owner, or say you are a vehicle owner, but you have one vehicle that you share with the family and you've got multiple places you need to go, we do have several other programs, our Clean Mobility Options program, and that program is focused on helping communities identify where there can be zero-emission transportation options, like having a car share or a dial-a-ride program. Say you have a community with elderly or consumers that need accessibility. You can come to us, we'll help you figure out that project, work with local entities to get that project going on the ground for your community. We also include electric bikes, so an electric bike share program, or even an electric bike purchase program that we aim to launch by the end of this year. So we've got a myriad of options to really help consumers understand that if you want to own a car, let's try to get you to an electric car. And if you aren't owning a vehicle or you've got other options, that you're choosing the healthiest, cleanest option, so we can really see a huge transformation across the entire transportation space.
Right, so a real suite of programs and just sort of a shift in the strategy from just kind of getting the word out about electric vehicles, getting people in California to know that they exist, to now perhaps being more targeted and getting it out to a more diverse set of communities. Orville, I'd love to get your thoughts on the role of incentives here in California. I mean, we've got 1 in 4 new cars are now ZEV vehicles. What's the role of incentives at this point, from your point of view? In the midst of this sort of transition in the transition.
Yeah, thank you so much, and it's great to be here at CalMatters. I think a lot of us were here talking about equity in EVs maybe about a year ago with Prop 30.
Yes.
So it's kind of a full circle moment of what could have happened in like an alternate universe if Prop 30 passed. We wouldn't be having a lot of trouble with selecting equity and EV kind of programs. So to the incentives, I think Lisa described kind of the history. And at first,
since you brought up Proposition 30, can you just briefly tell everybody here what was Proposition 30? What would it have done, and what happened?
Yeah, Proposition 30 was a initiative on the November ballot that would have instituted a greater income tax on Californians that made over $2 million in annual income tax. And those dollars would then have flowed into kind of bank accounts for zero-emission vehicle programs to help create some kind of cost certainty for programs like the ones that the Air Resources Board administers and ones that the Energy Commission kind of thinks through for infrastructure, and it did not pass. And so we kind of now have to think through what are annual allocations that aren't necessarily contingent upon just that extra income tax.
Right. What are the priorities now with a bit more of a limited pool of funds, particularly given that this is a budget deficit that we've been facing? But okay, great. Thanks for explaining that. Tell us a bit more about your thoughts on kind of how the role of incentives now. Again, 1 in 4 new cars are now ZEV vehicles.
Yeah, it's great. And I think part of it is a mindset. You talked about the comparison between a zero-emission vehicle, so it could be battery electric, it could be fuel cell electric, and the cost point comparative to your internal combustion engine. And, we still look at the cost as like, what's the upfront price point? When we think through like the longer-term costs of EVs versus traditional internal combustion engines, we are going to see that back-end saving. So it's, do you have the dollars up front to help you kind of meet that delta and put one of these EVs in your driveway, in your garage, or just purchase them in general? I think what Lisa talked about is, when California first started these programs, the goal was to accelerate the development of the technology. That's why, there are so many Teslas probably on the road, and so many people that would have probably been taxed under this new tax structure getting money from the state to buy those Teslas. It was, how do we move the technology forward fastest so that we could get the economies of scale and develop the technology so that you kind of see the next generation develop, a low-end model. So it goes from a Model 3 to like a Model S, right? Like all of those types of things. And I think where we are right now with the incentives is, for a long time, California has been very much giving everyone carrots, and now we're getting closer to the stick. And so when CARB has set these regulations in place for light, medium, and heavy duty for sales, it is going to move the market towards that in a way that kind of creates some certainty for those manufacturers, but also allows now California's legislature and program administrators to start focusing on those that maybe weren't the early adopters, those that need the technology now that it's a developed stage. So how do we get into the San Joaquin Central Valley and provide those tiered kind of programs and incentives so that they stack? I think for the first time in a long time, we're doing this with a federal partner. Finally, we have a federal administration that believes kind of in the power of EVs, not just as a climate change conversation, but also as an economic tool. And so when we have kind of an increased federal tax credit stacking with what California is offering, it really does allow people, for the first time in disadvantaged communities, to think through what they're going to purchase.
Yeah, Steve, we were having kind of an interesting conversation before we started. Just your thoughts about incentive programs going from this sort of let's just get the technology out there to now how much of an impact are they having? Are you simply rewarding folks for making a decision they might be making anyway? Sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth exactly, but yeah. From an automaker's point of view, how valuable are incentives at this stage?
They're particularly valuable. They're in California. We're at 25%. I think, as you mentioned, we're, so is and the question is always, and this is something that I know the California Resources Board struggles with: are we giving people a consolation prize for a car they would have bought anyway? Or are we actually, pushing them over the edge? Are we pushing them to buy an EV when they wouldn't otherwise have? And certainly that was our goal. And I worked with Lisa specifically and CARB for years to get as many vehicles on the road as possible. And I think now we're at 25% vehicles. That's in California. That's not nationwide. Nationwide, we're at 6-ish%. So the incentives, in the Inflation Reduction Act, which allows up to $7,500 in a tax credit, those are important because, in California we have 25%, not nationwide. So I think pushing that, it's critically important. I would also make a couple of points. First, as far as the low-income communities, the federal government, the $7,500, that's a tax credit. So you have to have $7,500 in tax liability. And if you're low income, you probably don't have that. So you probably won't get that. Number one, so that's first. But the second part is just having a vehicle is just part of the problem. You have to fuel that vehicle. And if you look at home charging, I have an electric vehicle, it's 11 cents per kilowatt hour for me to charge. I am like most of the 25% of the people buying electric vehicles today, affluent, single-family homeowners. And, they pull in, they plug in, they wake up to a full car. Car's fully charged. Low-income communities, if you're looking at public charging, which is many times the case, it's 3 times, 4 times, 5 times more expensive to charge your vehicle at a public charging compared to home. So is anyone tracking the portion of low-income residents who have the same access to EV charging as I do? As all of us do. Is anyone tracking it? Is it 1%? Is it 5%? I mean, the EV requirements are legal requirements, and they're very prescriptive. It's 51% in 2028. It's not 50%, it's not 55%, it's 51% exactly. But what are we doing for low-income communities? Do we have any idea what portion of low-income communities have charging? Anyone in this room know?
I have been doing a bit of reporting on just that idea, and I know that the California Energy Commission has certain mandates to track or just to put together a sort of map of drive times, how close people are to certain chargers, how many chargers are in specific communities. So that I know that is work that the state of California is doing and certainly cares a lot about, because having that electric vehicle infrastructure is, as you very rightly noted, Steve, is going to be kind of the next critical step towards just a more broad adoption. It can't just be for people who are, as you described, sort of, owner of a single-family home, can charge at home. There needs to be more points where people can kind of plug in. And with that in mind, Ted, I know you've done a ton of work on just this subject, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of some of the local communities you've been working with, and what different parts of California are doing to make charging a bit more available to folks.
Sure. And just in response to the question, do we know the numbers? I do not. But what we do know, and the Air Resources Board has documented this, the California Energy Commission, which is heavily responsible for documenting charging infrastructure in the state, has documented this. It is known that there is less access to publicly available charging in lower income and middle income communities, where drivers are also less likely to have access to private charging in their own driveways and garages. So it is known that the access is lower. And some University of California researchers, not my team, recently put out a study also showing that residents of those communities and communities of color also have benefited less from the air quality improvements of the EV transition. Regardless of where those vehicles are housed, where they are driven is, we're having cleaner air in richer communities directly as a result of these programs, which is part of the reason why Lisa and her team have been shifting those programs away from the general population and toward a more equitable and income-targeted distribution. But yeah, so my team at UC Berkeley, one of our focus areas, what we see as sort of this gap that Steve just identified, is there is a need for local level planning for where publicly accessible infrastructure will go. That means people who don't have the privilege of charging at home, getting that cheaper rate, having it the most convenient way to drive a car, far more convenient and more fun than fueling at a gas station. Home, hotels you go to, your workplace, back and forth. We need to have a system that makes sure that all the residents of the state benefit from that type of accessibility, that type of affordability. So I'll just do one example. We're working directly with the city of Oakland. And the city of Oakland they put out earlier this year a zero emission vehicle action plan. They're one of the first cities in the state to put out a plan that is exclusively devoted to that topic as a subset of their broader climate action plan. And it includes not just electric vehicle charging and electric vehicle policy for the city fleet, but it also includes connectivity to all the types of other clean mobility options, e-bikes, transit, that make a community fully connected and give residents access to the type of transportation that fits their needs. And so the city has developed this incredible, robust plan to reduce their emissions over the next couple of decades across multiple modes and be truly sustainable. And one of the aspects that I think is most interesting, they haven't quite implemented it yet. That's a funding question, which we can talk about in a minute, but they're trying to focus on clean mobility hubs with an equity focus. So specifically increasing mobility in communities where there has been a lack of public transit access, and there is probably likely to be a lack of access to electric vehicles and vehicle charging. So the goal of the city is to concentrate all those services in discrete locations in a way that brings charging infrastructure into communities now, even if there isn't necessarily the vehicle demand in place yet, and accompanies it with access to transit parking lots for BART, e-bikes to get that last mile, and shared mobility so that residents have access to these services that they benefit from now and into the future, and the city takes one bite at getting all the infrastructure in the ground. So I think that's a really compelling approach. We'll see what happens when they actually get the funds to implement it, but that's one way that local governments, I think, are really moving this forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Lisa, I know you wanted to respond, I think, to that question that Steve posed, like, do we know? Do we know, how much infrastructure exists in some of these areas, or was it something else that you were interested in talking about?
So to build off of
Yes.
off of both points, actually, while we are working with the locals across several of our projects to find ways to ensure that charging is accessible, that it can support the projects that we're funding in particular. When it comes to vehicle ownership, especially for the low-income consumers, one of the things that we are trying to employ now, while we're continuing to work with locals, is ensuring that they have access, when they do have access to a public charging, that we're helping. We're helping with the costs there. And so we're including charge cards so that a low-income consumer for the first 2 years or so of owning that vehicle doesn't have to pay for charging the vehicle. They can go to a public space, they can charge, and that's part of the incentive for them. We also have efforts underway with Caltrans where we are trying to find ways to help consumers that don't have bank accounts, that don't have the means to utilize a card like that, to be able to access their phone technology, be able to use a Cash App and walk up to one of the charging stations and get their incentive through us and build in even rewards programs. Every time you charge your card, you'll get back a percentage of that that'll allow you to charge even further. So we are trying to find as many innovative ways as we can to ensure that the consumers have access today, while we know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done to build out at the local level.
I think California has been cognizant of this, and the legislature kind of matches what the Air Resources Board is doing on the vehicle side with the Energy Commission and the infrastructure side. So there is a program called Communities in Charge, and it is set up to provide light-duty level 2 charging to multifamily dwellings, places of worship, tribal areas, community colleges, other education institutions. It's essentially where people gather. And so currently it has given about $29 million for apartments, just to make sure that, the kind of case that Steve was talking about, how do we get more people to have kind of a combination of chargers at their apartment garages? And California, I think following on the vehicle model, is saying on the infrastructure, yes, we have to pump money out there first and start making it as easy and cheap as possible for property owners to put these in, because we don't want this kind of economic divide, right, that we're talking about, and this equity divide that we're talking about with zero-emission vehicles to widen. We need to see it start shrinking, and we can't just give vehicles without chargers because that's a one-time use. So if we make sure that the funding is available for a program like Communities in Charge, then they'll be able to access either chargers where they live or chargers where they work, or both.
And Steve, we talked about this last time we were on a panel together, which was in May, I believe, and I just sensed a real sense of urgency, and I'd love to invite you to respond to sort of kind of the work that's being done here in California. I believe you were saying, things have to really be happening now. Do you still feel the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, getting back to residential charging in low-income communities at multifamily dwellings, you can't ask low-income residents to spend an hour, 3 hours, 6 hours away from their families every week just to charge their car, while the affluent people pull in, plug in, and wake up to a full car. I mean, you just can't do that. So the focus has to be on residential charging. And I don't think we track it. And I also don't think we've established any goals whatsoever for residential. Do we have a goal that, like, by 2030, 25% of low-income residents would have home charging? That's a goal. That's a target. And we don't have that. And I'm not even sure that we're tracking residential, not public, but residential. And I applaud Lisa, and she's exactly right. The cost of public charging is vastly more than, but the convenience factor, you just can't expect low-income residents to spend hours and hours away from home charging their car. So yeah, I think the urgency is absolutely 100% still there. I applaud, like, the PUC, I believe, approved $350 million multi-unit dwellings and workplace chargers. So that's going on. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I think the first step is to measure it, and then we can manage it. So.
Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting question, right? Because we started off our discussion talking about accessing the vehicles themselves. Okay, they're expensive, fine. There are some rebate programs. The cost is coming down, but now we're really discussing keeping the vehicles and being able to have them in your home, in your apartment, on the street. Ted, Lisa, I'd love to talk, everybody here, let's just talk a little bit about what are some of the existing barriers to getting those chargers, a place where you can fill up, I guess, just to be clear, that's what we're talking about. What are some of the barriers that we're seeing to kind of getting that infrastructure, because that's what it is, that public getting that infrastructure out on the streets or maybe even homes. Ted, I know you have some experience sort of, with cities, with local communities, sort of trying to get that moving. What are some of the barriers we've been seeing?
Numerous and diverse depending on geography. I'll just start with a couple, and I think we'll all have a few of interesting ones to comment on. But cost, obviously, cost is number one, and cost flows through a lot of the other barriers that come up. But one of the big ones that we have seen is sort of cuts across all of the different permitting and regulatory and cost and ownership and management and safety and accessibility issues, which is that to the extent that cities or local governments want to have publicly accessible charging, whether it's in city parking lots or on the street or in parking lots at parks or in community hubs, like Orville was talking about, at houses of worship and commercial corridors and things like that, and cities are going to be sort of the responsible party for making sure that that is at least facilitated. It's a new type of infrastructure that cities have not typically been responsible for. And there's no agency, there's no department at the city level, there's no staff member whose job it is to process and receive the permits in this space and then get them out on the ground. It requires coordination across more than a half dozen local agencies, plus a utility if there's an electric utility in the space and not a city-owned municipal utility. And that means it takes years to get done and probably doesn't get done at all. If you have to coordinate across all of those entities and you don't have a discrete funding source and you don't have somebody whose job it is. So what we're seeing is that cities are trying to figure out, how do we put somebody in charge of this job who is not currently on staff and isn't paid for, or shift somebody over to that type of infrastructure? And then how do we get funding to support that for the next decade? And despite all the money that the state has to fund this and the federal government, there isn't quite money for that particular government job. Across the board. And so that's one that we're seeing, which is a major barrier, just the city capacity to think about this day in, day out.
And Orville, I mean, you're sort of intimately involved with the topic of infrastructure and what the state is doing to fund infrastructure. What's the most important thing that California can do right now to sort of ensure that we've got this infrastructure here for this transformation that that's coming down the pike?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is cutting down on the timeline for interconnection, energization. Those are big words if you're not in the utility world. Essentially, it's how do you provide the utility with the power that they need for the larger community, and how does the utility then get that power to someone's house or someone's school if they have electric school buses, a fleet if they're going to transition their medium heavy duty fleet. So we have still kind of operated a grid that may or may not have changed much in the last 100 years. And I'm very, I think, hopeful, because we've heard kind of an iteration of this same problem of, well, what happens when every home is going to have an air conditioner? What happens when every home is going to have a microwave and an air conditioner at the same time? So it's slowly built up the grid, but there is a lot of handcuffs on utilities, and not every utility is moving at the same speed. And not every utility is an investor-owned utility versus being a municipal-owned utility. So most of us are probably lucky enough to live in a SMUD district, which is the local Sacramento utility. Community-based, very good, probably a national, international leader on transitioning to zero emission and kind of getting into clean energy. If you randomly live in Sacramento over the river and are in West Sacramento, you are in PG&E, an investor-owned utility, which has a different set of circumstances when it comes to what they are doing with their energization and interconnection. They also report to the California Public Utilities Commission, and they have to have their rate structure approved by that regulatory body. So, utilities are moving at different speeds and at different scales, and I think what we are hoping kind of frees them up is what the industry is calling pre-build, of how do we forecast the amount of load that is coming onto a grid, and whether that is every fleet has to tell them how many trucks they have so that they can kind of think through what the 2036 timeline is, or cities have to share development plans so they know how many garages are coming in, and so that the utilities that are investor-owned kind of have the opportunity to maybe charge a little bit more on the ratepayer side. With PG&E, it's going to be really interesting because they just applied, I think, for $8 billion from the Department of Energy for their green loan program to start this process. How are they going to, build more power lines, substations? How are they going to hire staff? And they're also doing this at the same time as they are trying to ground power lines in fire-prone districts. So we're asking for a lot from our utilities. But if we kind of give them a little bit more freedom to start thinking through what the need is on a zero emission side, then the hope is that they could plan and go to banks accordingly.
Great. So, I think this is one thing that's really, I think, on people's mind and that you're sort of kind of touching on here, Orville, and then I'd love to ask this last question here, and then kind of open it up to the audience, because I'm sure people have questions, or some folks online as well too. But California has these twin goals, right? It's to transform our roads and get all these clean vehicles on the roads, but it's also to ensure we have renewable energy that are powering those vehicles. And I'm just wondering, what's that world look like? And is it a ton more offshore wind farms? Is it kind of coordinating how people charge up their cars or use energy, so avoiding charging during certain hours? How can these twin goals be accomplished? What happens to folks who don't work from home and don't have that level of access that maybe we all do? Lisa.
Just go ahead, Lisa.
It's a great question. And I don't have the best answers for it. What I can say is that I do think that it is a combination of efforts, right? When we have, the amount of goals that we are trying to achieve just in the clean transportation space is pretty significant. And when you are layering it upon energy goals, land use goals, it's a lot. It's a lot. And so I really do think it takes a very coordinated approach in making sure that when we are adopting as many policies, when we're adopting regulations, when we're adopting policies, when we are developing incentive programs, that we are considering what is happening across the aisle from us in the other sectors. And we try to do that as best as we can, but it is a challenge. You're at bureaucracy. I think we've heard about that a bit, right? The bureaucracy is quite challenging to maneuver, especially when we're talking about the land use components, but layering in the energy, layering in transportation. And so coordinating as much as we can, and at the Air Resources Board, we coordinate a ton with our sister agencies. We do a lot of coordination at the local level where we can. We try to work as closely as we can with communities directly too, so that we can hear what their specific needs are and try to really understand what programs might be best for us to bring in to support. And I think overall, really, that's the approach.
Absolutely. Yeah, some really critical work. So yeah, I would, and thank you, and I would love to know, how the audience feels, and whether you have any particular questions for our panelists. Should we open it up for some questions? And we do have a microphone.
Fast. Great panel. It's fantastic to be here, and thank you for CalMatters for sponsoring this topic. I had occasion to chat with the mayor of Fresno not long ago, and asked him what are the challenges that he sees with the electrification and the charging system. And what I gathered was that how can they maintain the infrastructure? It's not the installation, it's not the initial output, it's vandalism, it's malfunction, it's thievery. And as you alluded to earlier, these municipalities have no culture or history of taking over this responsibility, but leaving it to private sector under these circumstances, especially in the public format, is probably a dead end. So it's going to have to default to a county or a city. What are your thoughts on how would a municipality take on this responsibility for upkeep of these chargers that are infamous for breaking down?
Sounds like a good one for you, Ted.
So first of all, we're doing a little bit of work with Fresno. Tell the mayor to give me a call, because I want to talk to him. But we've spoken with city staff about this issue in Fresno specifically, and specifically linked to a wonderful set of public chargers that they installed a few years ago that they have had very little use of and has been heavily vandalized, and they've spent more money in maintaining those chargers than almost the value of the grant, which I believe originated with CARB. And they were so excited about these, and it wasn't a great location and sort of use case for charging at the time they installed. And one of the things that we've heard from a lot of different local governments is when charging is installed in an area where there is no demand for the vehicles and no local sort of desire to use them, it's kind of this sort of dead infrastructure. It has no use to the local population and the local community. And so it is more likely to be subjected to vandalism or just disuse and disrepair. When charging is installed in communities where the residents have bought into that charging and they are ready to use it, or it is co-installed with other amenities that the residents are ready to use at that time. For example, a vehicle charger paired with an e-bike charger, where maybe a few residents have the e-bike now, and maybe they get an EV in 5 to 10 years. That's a situation where that infrastructure is much less likely to suffer from vandalism or disrepair or disuse, because there's just more utilization of it. But that doesn't get to your bigger question, which is how can the city pay for this or be responsible for it? And I think different cities are taking different approaches. We haven't encountered many cities that feel that they are going to be directly responsible for owning and maintaining and installing the infrastructure in the public space. Most cities in California and the other cities we've talked to around the West Coast are envisioning a model where they permit and they enter into very structured long-term agreements, master lease agreements with private installers who are given access to a expedited and streamlined permitting process, a reduced cost permitting process to get infrastructure into that space. As we learn more and as that's shifted away from a grant-funded model with big bank of charges that goes in, but is ultimately a market-driven model where the city informs best fit sites, but it's a private company that is installing the charging and responsible for it, I think naturally the city will stay in its traditional government role of planning, site assistance with site selection or narrowing, and entering into firm contracts that require uptime and require O&M service, but not their cost responsibility to actually provide the O&M, and that will fall on the private companies. But it does require a much more robust city understanding of where and when to install infrastructure and how to push those private actors in the right direction so they don't just install in higher income areas where they know this charging infrastructure is going to be used tomorrow. So I think it's a complex sort of effort, but it's really much more for the cities to beef up their governance structure and not as much to beef up just their cash availability to do an O&M operation on the infrastructure.
Any other questions? Everyone's attention.
Thank you. We heard earlier about the challenges with increasing demand for the minerals that go into the batteries, and I'm wondering about the recycling and recovery of the minerals that are in the batteries that are already in the vehicles that are out there. Are there any of the panelists that could maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you.
For it. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't
Jump on
get
in.
ahead. I know something, so let me get in front of this one before I get a solar question. No, that's a great question. I think recycling is critical. I think EV batteries will be recycled. They're very valuable. We have a program. We worked with the Department of Toxic Substance Control on the EV battery recycling panel or something, and we came to a conclusion. We have a recommendation. I think we're working right now with the legislature to put that in law, and we would support that. I will say this, that the first rule of recycling is you need something to recycle. And right now, there are 284 million vehicles in the United States. About 1% of those are electric, and virtually all of that were sold in the last 4 years. So those vehicles, the first step is the vehicles are probably going to last 15, 20 years. So that pushes us out to 2035. And then there's the second use. So you may see these batteries used in energy storage systems, whether that's grid level or home level. So you could see that, and that would be a valuable use because at the end of the vehicle life, the battery's probably going to have 60, 70, 80% capacity left. So reuse it. So my only point is recycling will not get us out of the need to get those critical minerals to beef up light, medium, heavy-duty vehicles. But it is important. It will ramp up over the next 10, 15 years, and I'm very, very confident that there will be a robust recycling of EV batteries.
Yeah, and happy to work with the Alliance. I think the bill that they're talking about is Senate Bill 615 from Senator Ben Allen, and it would mandate that EV batteries are repurposed, reused, and then eventually recycled. So we want to have the whole circularity system going in. It's still in the process of kind of going through committees, and we hope to get it passed next year. But to your question, yes, I think recycling of these batteries eventually is going to be really, really important. We need to get past just the lithium-ion technology, right? And I think that is where the chemistry is going on. That's where a lot of startups are in place. I've read articles about, using seaweed extrapolation and how do you kind of create the chemistry internally. I think also we probably have to get past as a society we need the longest range in our electric vehicles. And we have to get towards reducing vehicle miles traveled, but we also have to get to smaller batteries because they reduce the cost and they kind of facilitate the driving that we mostly do on a daily basis. The infrastructure network is growing. It's going to have its fits and starts, but the National EV Infrastructure Network that came from the federal government is going to start rolling out, and that's almost $500 million for California for the next 5 years. A group of, I think, 7 auto manufacturers said that they want to do something similar to Tesla's supercharging system. So we know that there will be the chargers along the routes that we're probably going to take. Tesla, I think, just today announced a cheaper version of their vehicles with a reduced range. I think that's great to see as manufacturers because, we were having a discussion with some of, the guests here and saying, how much do we drive a day? There are super users, yes. And that, I think, is where we have to talk about the income gap and the equity gap, is that there are a lot of people that have to drive a lot of miles a day, and they are more towards the lower end of the income spectrum. And so how do we get them kind of the incentives? And I think Lisa's team is doing a great job there. How do we provide them with alternatives to owning a car, which is all very expensive? They're doing a great job there. But it's how do we now think through the next level of technology? So it's going to be cheaper batteries, batteries that charge faster, solid state batteries, different chemistries, technologies, different ranges. And I think we are getting very close to like this exciting time where EV options are going to run the gamut of like a cost spectrum. And there are going to be like the Escalades EVs that just came out or announced. That's like $125,000. But I think we're going to start seeing more on the lower end where manufacturers are looking at what's that $25,000 price point. A little different than the Echo, but it will get there.
I was going to say, good, I drive a Toyota Echo. I mean, I'm not getting the $125,000.
Park it in the Escalade. Go zero emission.
Do we have time for one more question? How are we doing, Neil? Okay, one more quick question. I know this gentleman has had his hand up for a bit.
Yeah, I was just curious about the multi-dwelling unit question. And in particular, multi-dwelling units are often real estate corporations. So you've got a lot of capital intensity there already. Plus, there's all the new development. So I'm kind of curious because, we are going up rather than out in our cities. So it's kind of curious that multi-dwelling seems like it's being neglected.
I couldn't agree more. And so a couple of areas on that. One is building codes. If it's new construction, it's so much cheaper to put it in. Because if you wait, you have to trench up the parking lot, you have to put it in, So first is building codes. Every unit should have access to charging. If they have a parking spot, they should have a charger. And the second is retrofitting that, and those are very, very expensive. The California Public Utilities Commission, $333 million, they were providing Southern California Edison $15,000 per charger, and that didn't include the charger. So yeah.
And I'm probably going to be a little opposed to you. It's like, I don't believe every unit should have a parking. I don't believe every unit should have a parking spot. I think we have to reduce the amount of cars on the road. That's transit, that is micromobility, that's clean mobility options, that's e-bikes. We need to plan better if we're talking about the economic divide. And when we get to those units that can't be, retrofitted, there are, mobile battery units right now that are large batteries on wheels that can, be trucked in, trucked out. It could slow sip off of existing infrastructure and then, give a DC fast charging or a level 2 charging experience. So I think we have the opportunities, but, a lot of it is the economic divide, which we can get to, kind of was in some instances created by a lot of these things. Everyone has to have a parking spot or own a vehicle, and we haven't connected these cities because we've grown out sprawl. But if we're starting to revolutionize with the terms of like zero emission and climate change, then we're going to get closer and then have hopefully more opportunities for connectivity.
And I think that's a great place to end. And so, well, once again, thank you all for joining us this hour and for everybody for being here. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Neil.
It's also a great place to start, right? That is the next conversation that we have to have. This is obviously not a topic that goes away anytime soon. Thanks to you all so much for being here for the conversation. Thanks to you all for joining, both in person and online. Again, a reminder, we are a nonprofit news organization. Really appreciate your support. Sign up for our newsletter so you can keep up with these events. And we'll see you at the next one. Thanks so much.